this session. We go. So I'm Paul Marson. I'm Chief of Country Support at OGP. I'm also a trustee of Integrity Action. So everything I say today about Integrity Action is 100% true because I know them from the inside, and I'm very positive. So welcome to the start, in a way, I think, of the OGP Global Summit Week. It's Monday. The first events are happening here in the creative city. Especially welcome to today's event on that's called Build, Deliver, Check, and organized by Integrity Action. So let me start with setting the scene a bit in general for this week and the topic we're talking about. The new strategy of OGP builds on the success that we've collectively created in the first decade, which is the essence of it is that if you involve civil society and citizens in policy making, you get better reforms and you get better results. And I think that's important for our discussion today. Now, the results I've created collectively in the first decade are impressive, but they're also not enough. So that's the challenge for the second decade, because the challenges we're facing collectively as a community are complex and they're daunting. Just 100 kilometers from here, over the 2020s, that comes on top of a pandemic, the climate challenge, of the polarization, of the challenges of artificial intelligence, etc., etc. So it's a very complex and daunting time we're talking about. Now, I might be biased. I am biased, I think, but open government is part of the answer if we want to figure out how to fight the challenges of corruption, if we want to fight climate change, want to reduce inequality, build trust, etc. One of the key elements of that is engaging citizens. Now, I have, from our experience, a few lessons of what you need to do when you talk about citizen engagement, but I think online, next to me in the room, we have people that are as much, if not bigger experts in doing it. But a few things I've picked up over the year in 4 bullets. One is you need to engage citizens on topics they actually care about. The only way to engage them meaningfully is if it is about something they care about that will improve their lives, their daily lives. And with that, you also get the buy-in and support from senior civil servants or from politicians. The second one is that you have to do it at the right moment. You have to bring in citizens when there's still space for a decision to be influenced and not when actually the ship has already sailed. The third one is if you create the opportunities for citizens to be brought into policy making, you have to have the courtesy to also let them know what you do with their inputs and their feedback and their monitoring efforts. Seasoned response, giving them an idea of how you use what they gave you, and better even action following what they tell you is really, really needed. And the final one, I would say, is if you monitor your efforts around citizen engagement, make sure that you don't look at it just in a quantitative way, which we very often see governments do, the number of citizens consulted, the number of efforts for citizen engagement, but also look at the quality of it. How rich was the conversation? How real was the opportunity to influence? And how was the feedback given? Welcome. Please have a seat. Now, one of the most difficult things often when it comes to citizen engagement is figuring out how to include marginalized groups, communities of color, the poor. And I think a really interesting set of examples we're starting to see in OGP are exactly on that topic. And I'm really happy to start seeing that. I want to give you one example, which is from Mexico in Quintana Roo, which is a very small place in Mexico, but it is very important for Mexico because there's a lot of tourists there. So in terms of GDP, it is one of the fastest growing spaces in Mexico. That also means, because of that fast growth, that the opportunities for corruption are also growing. And what they did in Quintana Roo, how you could create more opportunities for marginalized in their case also the EFRA policy making. And from the state level to the municipal level, they've created a lot more additional opportunities with thousands of citizens participating in actually discussing the strategic planning for their own municipalities, including the infrastructure planning. So it's one of the first times in that region that marginalized groups have been fully included in shaping their surroundings, literally. So that from the side of OGP. Let's switch to integrity action for a second. I really like line integrity action has been using for a while. Citizens monitor, everyone.
Still the same.
Still the same, correct. So the idea of integrity action is they work always with local society organizations to create these opportunities of citizens to engage with governments, particularly on infrastructure projects and services. Two of the things that really matter. Using the integrity action developed tools. Everyone this week attending the summit has commented on the democracy side. Yes. Discussion, I hope it is that more and more governments and organizations think through opportunities of citizen engagement in all the projects and policies, because problems, there's only one path to success if you really want to make the ambition of open government come alive, which in the end is about stronger democracy. It's also about better outcomes for people. The only way to get there is by engaging the citizens, and you need the tools to do that, which is what integrity action brings. Now, if we then turn it to today's conversation, hopefully we have everyone online. We'll have two presentations first, and then we'll have a panel discussion with a bit of Q&A with people online and here in the room. We have two presentations first, one from Albert Ahim from KNUST Ghana, with a response from Mumuni Mohammed, who I also see online from Sen Ghana. And then we have a presentation by Elsevier Okech from Kenya. And after that, Aidan, who's my real boss at OGP, takes over to moderate a conversation between himself, Linnea Mills from GPSA, Daniel from Integrity Action, as well as Courtney Tomey from Results for Development. But we turn over to Albert first.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just want to present an overview of a learning research that we've been conducting as part of a project that has been ongoing in Ghana here. So my name is Albert, as Marcin rightly said. I am based in Ghana, working with the Kwame Nkruma University of Science and Technology. I will just give a brief overview of the project and where the research component looks like, and then offer a brief remarks in terms of our findings on the extent to which citizen-centered monitoring contribute to better value for money and also improve quality of services and infrastructure. One of the research team members, Catherine, is online, and so at some point, I think she can also maybe share some insights in the discussion, or she can also offer a word or two in the process. Okay, so in the interest of time, just a brief context of infrastructure provision challenges in Ghana, which kind of set the basis for this work. So in Ghana here, the construction sector constitutes a significant portion of our gross domestic product and expenditure. And one of the key concerns have been that there are usually delays and non-completion and even abandonment of local level infrastructure projects. There's recent research, comprehensive one, which was done by some colleagues at the University of Oxford, which concluded that about a third of projects that are initiated at the local government level. In Ghana, we call it MMDs, that is metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies, often remain unfinished. And projects that typically are supposed to be completed in 6 to 12 months often take up to 3 years. And so there's a huge gap between what is sometimes planned and what is actually completed in terms of the completion rate. And they calculated that the annual expenditure on abandoned constructions stands around $26.6 million. So that is a problem, and especially in a developing country context where infrastructure is really supposed to play a key role in contributing to improved livelihood. And so one of the questions, just as this workshop or seeks to explore, is whether citizen-centered monitoring can give us some insights into resolving some of these challenges, particularly whether having citizen monitors can contribute to better value for money and for savings, for completion rate, faster completion infrastructure. These are some of the key concerns that informed the basis of this work. And the research is just a component of a larger research larger project that was implemented between 2021 and 2023 in Ghana here. It was implemented by Ghana in partnership with Integrity Action in Northern Ghana. And the project worked by training some monitors to monitor about 15 infrastructure projects in 2 regions of Ghana. Monitors usually took monthly monitoring of the project, progress of the project, so as they could track their progress, and then the observations that they made are usually reported on a digital platform which Integrity Action had built. It's called DefCheck. And the observations were also shared with authorities for prompt action. So part of the monitoring activities involve the monitors engaging community members about their satisfaction of the project and their views about what's going well and questions around that. So the research elements of the project, like I said, explore the potential value that citizen-centered focus, for example, can offer the service providers for the 15 more projects that were monitored. Because if I have just a few minutes, I'll just highlight some of the core functions, findings, and then maybe in the discussion, if people want detailed explanation about the processes of the research, I could maybe go over that. But like I mentioned, so the first thing is what do citizen monitors do in these processes? And basically, when they identify an issue, there are about 6 different ways or actions that these monitors take. That include engaging directly with the contractors, either individually or as a group, to resolve the problems or issues that they may have found as part of their monitoring activities. Sometimes they report the issues to community leaders, for example, the chiefs or the assembly member who is a political representative of the community. Oftentimes, they make complaints or report to the district official, maybe the engineer or the planner, about their observations so that some actions can be undertaken. And like I mentioned, they also upload it on the dev check, sometimes to the attention of Ghana or Integrity Action, so that they can also collectively work with the stakeholders to resolve the issue. In some minor cases, some of the reports were shared with the media outlets, and then also engaging with the other community members about their findings so that the community members can also talk about the issues when they meet the authority that be. And so these were some of the activities that the monitors did. So one of the things we wanted to find out is to find out whether there was evidence that the citizen-centered monitoring was adding any value as far as the construction of the project were concerned, especially for government. So here we collated, different stories about the trajectory of the project and the role that communities found the monitors doing. So basically, yes, we found at least 4 different experiences that added some evidence that citizen-centered monitoring was adding value. One of them is that through the roles of the monitors, we experienced cases where contractors or their agents often responded positively. Each time an issue was raised or reported. And then the monitors also contributed to improvements in the process of the construction, particularly making sure that materials were of good quality. So we encountered cases where, but for the role of the monitors, the contractors may have used material that the community considered to be inferior. Because the monitors were on there regularly and they found it, they were able to find some of these issues and then reported to authorities, and then resolution was also made, which ultimately it may go well to kind of enhance the quality of this infrastructure project. Then in some communities, we found that the monitoring has succeeded in reducing the delays in construction for some of the projects, particularly bringing some absent contractors back to site to complete an abandoned work. So this is also one of the things that we came across. And then in some communities, the project had been completed, but it hasn't been put to use. Sometimes politicians in Ghana here will have to commission it before these projects are being put to use. But through the advocacy from the monitors, we found that the projects were being brought to use much earlier than what may have been planned by the authority. So based on all the evidence that we collected, the various stories, we kind of categorize the different pathways through which citizen-centered monitoring contribute to better value for money and improve quality of services and infrastructure. And in this specific example that of the 15 projects that we monitored, we found that there are about 5 different ways. The first one has to do with early detection of problems. So through the work of the monitors, problems are often detected early, and then resolution is found. Then in several communities, one mechanism is identification and prevention of thefts through some materials are often left on site, and then nobody is there to watch it. But because the monitors were there regularly, they made sure that materials, when they are not in a safe place, were often relocated to a better place, which prevented some thefts and things like that may have affected the quality of the material that were being used. Then we also found that, the work of the monitors, one of the pathways through which the monitoring was contributing to better value was, there was increased transparency in some of the project. Communities became aware of the project, who was funding it, when is this supposed to end, where, and some questions that previously they may not have originally known. And then there was a better project design and largely enhanced public participation and also support, where you have the communities showing interest in the work that the contractors were doing. So these are just some of the pathways that we found citizen-centered monitoring approach contributing to better value for money. I'll just skip this because I've just explained them one by one. So having collated some of these stories, we also try to see if we can quantify some of these observations in a quantitative analysis. And here the approach we used were largely more of a multiple regression analysis to see whether citizen monitor is a predictor of two main variables: early completion of projects and also cost savings. What we found is that the citizen monitoring is only one factor. There's a whole lot of other project-specific factors that influence cost savings and completion rate other than the citizen monitoring, which were not really covered or captured by the model. So what we draw from this insight is that beyond just the citizen monitoring, the community monitoring were not really solely responsible for bringing about better value for infrastructure, but there are other enabling factors that can really make their work much more effective. So, for example, timely release of funds to contractors. If citizens monitors report abandonment or project that have been abandoned because contractors have not been paid, beyond advocacy, if the contractor is coming because they have not been paid, there's little that the monitors can do in this regard beyond just what they are reporting. And so when you have timely release of funds to contractors, then it's a key trigger that then the monitors can monitor their progress of their work and then engage the contractor to do a better job. We also found that a factor, for example, like the political will to sanction non-performing contractors is one of the enabling factors. So when citizens monitor and they found problems and they make these known to authorities, they are just intermediaries. So if the authorities don't act, the effectiveness of what is expected to come out will depend much on the actions that the district assembly or district authorities are likely to undertake. So in what we just trying to conclude is that citizen monitoring or citizen-centered monitoring is really important, but in itself, it becomes more effective and it works best when you have other factors, especially from the assembly side, helping these processes to complete. For example, the timely release of funds, political will to sanction non-performing contractors, and even the monitoring functions of the assemblies themselves, which is not often effective as we may want. And so we found that collaboration and coordination between all the stakeholders involved, contractors, district assemblies who often award the contract, the communities themselves could play a much more better role in enhancing quality of infrastructure delivery. And so Conclusion is that citizen monitoring can indeed contribute to better value for projects, for public money in several aspects of the construction. Because from what we gathered, the presence of monitors often contribute to early detection of problems. There's a course correction, there's transparency and improved completion time. But facilitating this, we are able to have better value and more value towards the construction of the project. But effectiveness should be assessed in consultation with other factors, not solely on the citizen monitor. So I'll just pause here, and then the discussion, I can add on more. If Catherine is around during the discussion, she can also offer them that perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Albert, for a great presentation. That gives already a lot of food for thought. Let's go directly to Muni Mohammed, who was at Sen Ghana, to hear their perspective. I hope we have.
Thank you very much.
With us.
Thank you very much. Can I go ahead? Thank you very much for the opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Great. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that Albert and Co have done a very good job. That was a very bulky report that Albert has been able to synthesize in just some few slides. In terms of our perspective on this, I want to look at it from the supply side in terms of the government side. This particular project, even though very short, over the last 2 years, given the findings or the outcome of the finding from where we sit, has actually given true meaning to Ghana's decentralization system, which actually makes provision for citizens' participation in the planning, implementation, and monitoring of government interventions. But over the years, this monitoring function of citizens has actually been downplayed due to several reasons. I mean, Sen Ghana is one of those organizations over the last 25 years that has been working, with citizens to empower them to be able to monitor government development interventions. But I should say that this particular intervention, which has been technology-based, has actually given true meaning to, the Decentralization Act of Ghana, which actually makes room for citizens to participate in this process. Why am I saying this? Our governance system already anticipates that no matter the commitment at the level of the duty bearers and local government authorities, citizens have a right to participate in the process. And there has been structures, set up at the grassroots level. So that we have what we call decentralized structures, or even like citizens-led accountability structures already set up by law. But the reality is that these accountability structures has not been functional because governments actually haven't been able, they haven't appreciated the complementary role, even though it's a matter of law that citizens can play in this process. And so this particular project has actually effectively and efficiently ensured that citizens have been empowered. The assumption has always been that citizens that don't have the capacity to monitor. I mean, they are not technocrats. They cannot be at the level of technocrats. And so they cannot be able to raise very critical issues that require the attention of local government authorities. But with targeted capacity building, I think through this project, we have demonstrated that citizens do not need to have the same capacity as engineers at the assembly, but with some targeted capacity, they still can be able to raise very critical issues that can stimulate responsiveness on the part of local government authorities. But also, most importantly, is the fact that this intervention has also demonstrated the potential of citizens-led monitoring to reduce corruption. The reality is that in Ghana, awarding contracts has been one of the mediums through which local government authorities, and for that matter, politicians, working with political cronies, have managed to siphon government money through their issuance of contracts. Contracts are they are left not to account because then they are aligned to various political parties. But this project has demonstrated that if citizens are involved in the process and can raise critical issues, of course, when citizens raise issues and government do not respond, it has implication on their political fortune. And that is one of the good things about Ghana, that the citizens of Ghana are increasingly becoming very much enlightened, and that is also putting pressure as far as responsiveness is concerned. Of course, the last point that Albert has raised, which has to do with the responsiveness of central government in terms of release of funds, is something that is very important. But also the fact that given the economic crisis we find ourselves in this country, the monitoring function of local government authorities is increasingly becoming very weaker because of the inadequacy of resources from central government to be made available for them to actually realize this mandate. And therefore, this has actually necessitated the need for citizens to be given that capacity to actually complement. And aside some of these factors that Albert has raised, which potentially has led to some financial savings, the fact that local government authorities sometimes in a year, in every quarter, in line with our statutory requirements, government is supposed to send funds to the district assembly every quarter. Sometimes they receive money meant for first quarter towards the third quarter or the end of the last quarter of the year. It meant that ongoing projects, would not actually get supervision by engineers and planning officers. And therefore, to the extent that this project has empowered citizens, they have been able to monitor and provided adequate, feedback to these officials in order that they can be able to act on this, has also contributed to, actually saving some money. Eventually, when these monies come to the assemblies, they are not returned back to central government, and they do not have to repeat or go to, that can even reduce the frequency of their visit if citizens are already providing feedback. So at the organizational level, we think that this project, it's one of the system thinking approach to actually ensuring physical accountability. And that is one of the critical challenges that we face in Ghana now. How do we ensure, fiscal accountability, given the myriad of challenges we have with the misuse of public funds, but also the issue of corruption? So we think that this project is a test case for us to be able to use to see how we can upscale, not necessarily by the increasing the number of districts, but how do we get government to be able to incorporate some of this learning into our decentralized planning process in order that citizens can actually be strengthened, but the most importantly, use technology innovatively. I mean, the fact that this project has used technology innovatively is what has culminated in addressing the difficulty as far as citizens' access or feedback to local government authorities is concerned. And that for us, it's something that, is worthy of taking note of. So I would pause. If there are questions based on the presentation, then we will wrap it up. I was told I have 5 minutes. I'm mindful of not exceeding that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Momini. That was just 5 minutes. Well done.
Thank you.
Let's turn to the last presentation from Elshiba Okech from Kenya to hear a different case study. So over to you.
So much from Kwale County, Kenya, and we have been implementing the Voice Project in Kwale County, social accountability that 2018 to March 2023. So citizen monitoring of county infrastructure and also services. And basically today I'm going to share how the status of projects monitored by citizens differ from the unmonitored projects. Yes, so just like what I shared, the social accountability project was implemented from April 2018 to March 2023 with the funding support from Integrity Action. And in this project, we trained over 100 community monitors who are involved both in monitoring infrastructural projects and services. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we could not continue monitoring services. And we were early 2020. So there was a very minimal intervention services. And the monitors are just like the way my colleague from Ghana has explained. We'll just visit the project sites, identify problems, and then try to see how to engage different duty bearers to find solutions to the identified projects. So monitors will monitor projects that are within their reach. They would visit the project sites at least twice, depending on the project, the distance, and also the availability of time. And sometimes if maybe there are issues that need close follow-up, make frequent visits to the project site. So in this research, data was collected from 283 infrastructural projects that were between 19th September and 13th October 2022, focusing on projects that were implemented between 2018 and 2022, irrespective of whether they were monitored or not. You can watch next. Yes, so basically, in the absence of monitoring by community monitors, whenever the government is implementing a project committee is identified, and these are people from the same community where the project is being implemented, and they're supposed to oversee implementation of this project. However, the challenge is that most times identification of these people is either politically influenced or is just being done for the sake of having a committee in place. You find that they're not being trained, and therefore someone might be identified to be a PMC, a project management committee person, without adequate skills to help this oversee the implementation of such projects. And following the introduction of the Social Accountability Project in Kwale 2018, the county government established a Department of Monitoring and Evaluation. And I think this is maybe having noticed that this department is important, and that there was no any mechanism put by the government to ensure that the government has mechanism to monitor the projects that department. However, there was no policy to guide how this department is work, as well as the community. So in the survey that we did, the findings were that monitoring was linked to better conditions, especially when community monitors are involved. So the community monitors received training, and they were able to adequately monitor. And we also noticed there was increased in poor completion. If you look at ghost projects that were never complete and abandoned, the number went down as compared to the projects that were implemented before 2018. There are also good condition that led to better usage. And you find like when monitoring these projects, citizens get attached to these projects. The ownership of the projects goes high. So the moment that they are completed in good condition, then it means that even the purpose for which these projects were implemented, they are going to be used for that purpose. And we also found out that monitoring that begins after project's implementation has started is better than no monitoring at all. Just looking at why the government established the monitoring and evaluation department, it also sent a message that when someone is watching, then there's the likelihood that the project will be implemented the way they're supposed to be. is also high. So after project implementation starts, and then the contractors notice that someone is watching, they're likely to do better work. Next. Yes, so this is an example of one of the projects that was not monitored. If you look at it from far, it looks okay. But again, this is early childhood development learning center. And if you look at one of the ends, it is too high, such that children that are below 5 years are likely to maybe fall down and get injured in the process of maybe playing or moving around that facility. And we looked into this current financial year. Additional funds have been allocated to make sure that this project is in such a way that the children will be able to use this facility. We can go to next. Yes, this is one of the projects that was also monitored and completed in good condition. Though this project stalled for 8 months. In those 8 months, there was a lot of push and pull from the community to the contractor to the Department of Education. Because if you can look closely, you'll see that the ramp itself is tiled. And this is not good for maybe people will be using wheelchair. Even for the children themselves, for the ramps to have tiles, it means that it will not serve the purpose for which it's meant to, because it's supposed to be rough to allow the users have a smooth way to the veranda. And also, if you look at the doors, one of the doors was also not in good condition. If you look at the pole that is slanting, that pole that is slanting was the pole that had initially been fixed. But now, because it was not of the required standard, it had to be changed. And it was changed with the bigger poles that you see that have been set up there clearly. We go to the next. Yes, so more details maybe about the survey and other social accountability case studies that we've done can be found in our website, both at the Integrity Action website and also the KYGC website. So if you check at our website, you'll find there a number of also blog spots where you'll see other social accountability work that we've done throughout those years. Can go next. Yes, so initially we will do social audit on completed projects, but all those projects have ended up in shelves in form of social audit reports and recommendations that have not been, none of them has been addressed. But monitoring implementation of implementation, it means that we are able to address issues from the word go. If there's a problem in the foundation, it's addressed at that particular level. If the problem is at the roofing, it's addressed at that particular level. So it means that for us, monitoring has more benefits compared to doing social audit on completed reports. And we always believe that in the process of monitoring, citizens get to learn more about how things are supposed to be done, and also ensuring that everyone, including the stakeholders, are aware that are aware of the citizen expectation in terms of the projects that are being implemented. Next. Yes, thank you very much. That was basically my presentation, and even from what has been shared from Ghana is specifically equally similar to what we're experiencing here in Kwale County. And because of decentralization, we find that citizens are keen in holding governments accountable, and specifically the government that seems to be so closer to them, and that is the county government for affairs here in Kenya. For those few remarks, thank you so much. I'll engage further during the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Elishiba, for that second presentation. I think that sets a good scene for the panel discussion. So I'm handing over to Aidan and giving my chair to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you again for the great presentations from Ghana, 2 of them, and from Kwale in Kenya, just north of where I live, for the last one. And before I invite comments from sort of our experts, I read a study somewhere. I think it was about trust in a British academic institution, and they measured it very interestingly. They put some cookies out there. You know, they were unmonitored cookies, but they said, hey, only take one, you know, and these British academics, I think some might have been hungry, they were taking more than one cookie. So they'd run out for the others. And then somebody said, why don't we put a picture of eyes, just photos of eyes by the cookies. When they did that, the cookies lasted the day. So people felt they were being looked at by pictures of eyes, and they behaved themselves a little bit better. I think everybody got a cookie. It's reminded me, reading these studies, that, you know, when the principal, which is the citizens, are monitoring the agent, which is the government, maybe the government behaves a little bit better. So it's great to have some responses from our colleagues. Courtney is online, Linnaeus online, and you have to introduce yourself.
Yes, I will. Now?
Go ahead, yes.
I'm Daniel Burwood. I'm at Integrity Action as Evidence and Impact Manager. I've been there 4 years.
Okay, and you're in Kenya, were you? Or you analyzed the Kenya program?
Yes, so I did the analysis for the case study that Elishiba just presented, and also my role involves overseeing the research that was in Ghana. So.
Fantastic, thank you. So I could, you know, I was thinking of giving you 5 minutes or so each to give your responses, but maybe I could just launch with a couple of questions for you guys, and while others think about this. And the question or the comment or the observation I'd like to sort of put out there first is that it's interesting that citizen monitoring is happening during the execution. You know, this citizen involvement cycle in transparency, citizens are asked to prioritize their programs, they're asked to maybe prioritize budget allocation, and then they're told, go away, we'll do the building. You come back and let us know whether it's a good quality. This one is qualitatively different. Citizens are involved in the actual execution piece, monitoring the quality of the execution. Do you think this is why that you get this improvement? Because, you know, the argument you made at the end of the Kenya presentation that social accountability tends to be less effective. It comes after the thing has been done and is put on the shelf. Do you think this intervention done by ourselves of monitoring during execution is actually a driver of the impact that you're seeing? Let's start with you then.
Sure. Short answer, yes. I mean, that is our model at Integrity Action, is that we train monitors to accompany the implementation of the program, the project, whatever it is, construction. I think that was, if you look at the 5 areas that Albert highlighted in, so from the Ghana research, that the pathways in which the monitoring delivers value, some of those are only possible because they're there during the time. So the early identification of problems, you know, that's only possible because they're there on time. If they came along, you know, at the end of a year construction and pointed out that a disabled ramp hadn't been built, then that's not an early identification of a problem. Similarly with, you know, stopping theft and so on. So yes, absolutely being there. Ideally from the beginning, and as you say, from the public participation processes and making sure that the things are built right. But actually what's interesting as well, so from the Kenya case study, so that was the analysis of, I can't remember exactly how many, getting onto 300 projects, of which about 2/3 had that monitoring during them. But the monitoring hadn't always been from the beginning of the project. In some cases, the project had started first, and then you know, the monitors had come along later, just because of the timings of integrity action involvement, KYGC involvement, and so on. But even with those cases, the reason why monitoring started later, it's still the relationship with them being in better condition is still there. So yeah, it's better the earlier they are than if they can accompany, but it's still valuable even if they come a bit late.
Maybe I'll ask Courtney or Linnea. Let's start with you, Courtney. There was some tentativeness in the conclusions of the Ghana survey, saying lots of other things could have contributed to this. Are we being modest with our claim, Courtney? Can we claim a little bit more the fact that, yes, monitoring actually catalyzes government action in a way that not monitoring doesn't? Can we claim that? Or are we going to be a little bit tentative and modest about claiming causality? I want to push you a little bit on the causality piece. Courtney, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Aidan, and thanks to the team at Integrity Action and everyone for allowing me to be involved in this really exciting conversation. So, I think there has been enough research and there has been enough out there to be able. Oh, are you not able to hear me? Okay, it sounds like maybe people on the line can hear, but not
online. We can hear you, Courtney.
Okay, should I continue? Okay, I'll continue, and then hopefully we can figure out the connection in Estonia. So I think what we've seen is, there is enough evidence out there that we know that citizen monitoring and social accountability largely can be can really cause government action and can cause increased accountability, increased transparency, and better outcomes. We also know that's not always the case. And I think one of the really exciting things about the work that was presented from Ghana and Kenya is that these pieces of research and this analysis does start to share what some of those contributing factors can be. I worked on a project for many years where we did an evaluation that actually found that at least one form of community monitoring that we were testing did not have an effect on health outcomes. And what we saw in our analysis was that there were a lot of other things that needed to be in place to see those changes that we weren't able to see. So I think on the one hand, yes, there is good evidence that citizen monitoring can have a big impact. But I do also think that we need to acknowledge that, it's necessary, it's not sufficient. And there are these contributing factors. And I think in particular, the work in Ghana and what Albert presented, I think is very exciting because it does start to point out, okay, what are some of those other things that need to be in place? What are some of the other things that can help? And I think it provides us as practitioners as well as researchers with better information that we can use to better design programs. So, bringing in government champions early, looking at things like political will, a number of these overcoming certain resource constraints. I think these are all things we can do to ensure that, these sorts of community and citizen monitoring programs are not just potentially having an impact, but they actually are. So I'll stop there. Hopefully the team in Estonia is still connected.
Yes, we are. Can you hear us, Courtney? Just nod if you can.
Yes.
I think we missed a little bit of your intro, but I'm glad you sort of reclaimed some of the power of this approach to explain the improvement in government performance, or at least in the condition of the projects. Linnea, I'm going to ask you a slightly different sort of different question, and that is about challenges. And I want to pick out one challenge. Imagine integrity action is not there. Are citizens motivated to actually do this kind of monitoring themselves? Would they engage without the catalysis that integrity action and others in the field, or even at Kwale, because we do similar kind of stuff? Would they be engaged without this, seeing the results, or potentially seeing the results of their engagement here? Linnea, what do you think? How do we get citizens more interested organically in monitoring the projects which are going to affect the quality of their own life?
Thank you, Eden. Thank you for bouncing a super difficult question at me. I guess how do we know that they aren't, in a sense? We know evidence from our projects, and we monitor what our projects are doing. We aren't monitoring where we haven't got projects. But so it's a very interesting empirical question. What are citizen doings when they aren't formal projects, formal initiatives that are looked at and there are gathered evidence around? Do people need a catalyst? The empirical question, I actually don't know. I don't know the answer. Different contexts, different barriers to what citizens face to have the distance between themselves and their elected or their representative in government. For example, we have interesting evidence from Mongolia right at the moment in GPSA, and the GPSA has together with the World Bank has a large social accountability program called Masamtu in Mongolia, and it has rolled out all over Mongolia. So it's one of those, let's see what we can get if we really carpet bomb this idea of social accountability. And what our evaluator is seeing at the moment is that in rural areas where there's a tight-knit community, the distance between the citizens and the representative is so small that those conversations are going anyway. In cities, the distance are big enough to be a barrier to citizen engagement, I guess. So, but of course, those even in the rural areas, those are informal conversation or informal, maybe network and engagement between citizen and their elected representatives. So they might not be the ones that we usually focus on to monitor and create evidence around. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to give you a super informed but interesting question, and a super interesting empirical question to further research. Absolutely.
Let me probe, by the way, yourself, Linnea or Dan. We've got some government people in the room here from the state of Jos, a plateau state in Nigeria. And I'm sure he's been taking pictures of the presentation. So I'm sure they're thinking, their brains are running. There was a thing you criticized project management committees in Kenya, saying, you know what, they were sort of goodish, but with citizen monitoring, they were even better. What's going on there, Linnea? Why do you think the PMC needed a citizen catalyst to have an even better job of delivering good projects? Start with you, Dan, and perhaps with you, Linnea. What's going on there?
Sure, yeah. I mean, with the PMCs, they're a good example of an existing structure. So Project Management Committee in Kenya, mandated by the Constitution to provide a kind of oversight role of government project delivery. They're meant to be made up of local community members, community leaders, and so I think the issues that were identified with them at the start of integrity actions work in Kwale County maybe 5 years ago. So one was around their equality nature. They didn't represent the entire community. They represented sort of powerful individuals in the community, typically men, yeah, those who have power. They were they just weren't very inclusive in terms of when they met. They didn't share their activities, maybe. So they're meant to be, so the bills of quantities and other public documents that should be publicly available according to the Kenyan Constitution. The idea is that the law is, in fact, they're meant to be provided to the PMCs by the contractor or the manager, but then anyone in the community can access them from the PMC. But actually, the PMCs typically didn't have them themselves, and a lot of the issue was capacity as well of the PMCs. They weren't trained in actually what they should be doing. They didn't, do that accompanying role that you were talking about beforehand. That they have a few token meetings, and I'm sure they can probably say more about it. But it's a good question in terms of then when someone such as a KYGC or an integrity action or whoever it is wants to strengthen social accountability in area in terms of whether you set up a parallel thing or try and strengthen what's already there. And I think in hindsight with Voice and in Kwale, perhaps we would have done it differently because we did start setting up a parallel system. So not just the monitors, but also joint working groups, which were sort of wider groups. Effectively doing what the PMCs should have been doing and kind of modeling good practice. And then over time, and it's been a lengthy engagement, 5 or so years. So some monitors have been elected into PMCs, some PMCs have been trained by KYGC and by some monitors. And some have just, learned what it is that they're actually meant to be doing and have the mandate to do because they've seen the monitors doing it and so on. And that is in fact potentially more sustainable. Those are systems that actually are there not just by some donor funding or whatever, but they're part of the constitution. So if they can function well, that's a good model.
Because I was going to ask, maybe Linnea on that point, I'm sure you heard Dan, slightly naughty question, just get rid of the PMCs and have citizens do the monitoring.
Could you please remind me what PMC, what it stands for?
The project monitoring committees, the ones that were, okay, they're doing a good job, but not quite good enough. What if one just replaced them with the citizen monitoring process? Daniel mentioned a parallel, almost a parallel, where you have them citizen one, but also training the PMCs, and then these move from citizens. My slightly naughty question is, remove the PMCs altogether and have the citizens do the monitoring themselves entirely.
Yes, so again, thinking on my feet, you naughty. So yes, my feet aren't thinking very quickly. Removing something that doesn't work. So if it doesn't work, it means that it's not feeding into a process that is of utility or has a value to the ones who are deciding within that process, I guess. So if I don't know, there's a saying in Latin America saying same priest, different donkey, or same donkey, different priest, something like that. If it's not the structure per se, it's not the group per se, but if it's not feeding into anything that is worth it, that is seen as a value of someone has an uptake of the information that's given, then we should probably take a look at what the problem is there, so that we don't just have another group of people thinking that if we just exchange the agent, then the structure will work. If the structure is faulty or the structure isn't the feedback loops that we were hoping, maybe we should look at the system and see what needs to be fixed in terms of those feedback loops.
Right, good question. So there's some questions coming up or some comments coming from, so I'd like to invite them from our colleagues here.
Okay. My name is Sam from Plateau State, Nigeria. Listening to what she just said, she's correct. I think the PMCs and the citizens are the same people. So if you remove the PMCs and leave the citizens, it won't work. But when you have SPVs like integrity action, then it works. Why? Because the integrity action gives the citizens the confidence to act in the right way. So there must be a special purpose vehicle that will help the citizenry to enforce the project monitoring rules. So that must be that's a key thing, I think, for the.
You need an intermediary between the citizen and the government.
Exactly.
I see, that's fascinating. It means that civil society still has some work to do. Can I ask Courtney before I invite some other comments? And then I'll come to you, sir. Just one that's sort of burning in my own chest here, and that is pushback from government. Courtney, did you experience, have you seen, this noble cause being pushed back against because government doesn't want people meddling in its affairs? And how has integrity action responded and reacted to that kind of pushback from government against citizen-centered monitoring? Courtney.
Sure, it's a great question, Aidan. You know, I can't speak to these two specific programs. I think maybe Dan and team can speak more to any government pushback on these programs in Ghana and Kenya. But this certainly is something that we see across social accountability and citizen monitoring programs. Sometimes it's, you know, a very well-meaning government that is just kind of looking at this and saying, how can, you know, we work better together? We have some concerns about how citizens are engaged in this monitoring. You know, do they have the information they need to actually play an active role? So it's not always malicious, but sometimes governments do have some suspicions. You know, on the flip side, we have to acknowledge that there are cases, it's certainly not every case where social accountability is an important contributor, but there are cases in which there's actual instances of corruption. And, you know, corruption happens because someone in power, someone who has that power, sometimes someone in government, you know, has an incentive to do something, you know, wrong because they can benefit from it. And so when you have things like that, you do have to expect there is going to be some pushback. I think one of the things that we're seeing more of, kind of looking at trends within citizen monitoring, and I think this is very much a positive thing, is that there is, I think, largely a trend towards more collaboration as opposed to contestational citizen monitoring. So, you know, communities and citizens and intermediaries like Integrity Action saying, okay, are there opportunities to find government champions, to find, you know, people in government or institutions that really want to, you know, support and work with citizens because they do want to see improvements. And I think that's largely a very positive thing. So, you know, we may be seeing less of that government pushback than we used to, maybe like, you know, 10 or so years ago. However, the one kind of caution I would put out is that, you know, there are cases in which monitoring and citizen advocacy does need to be contestational, again, in cases where there is corruption. And I do think you can have a danger when things become too collaborative that, you know, people sort of shy away from instances where, you know, governments do need to be held to account in some ways. So, and I think that relates actually to the earlier question on the PMCs and citizens kind of substituting for PMCs. I think sometimes that's necessary, but it's also important that, you know, citizens are not seen as the only solution when in a lot of cases, government should be doing more as well.
Good point, Courtney. Just before I come to you, to ask you that, did you experience any pushback in the monitoring phase, but even in the research phase for the monitoring this last couple of years?
Yeah, so in these particular programs, so in Kenya and Ghana, and I'll include the research accompanied the program in Ghana, really, so it's faced some of the same challenges. But I think one thing is firstly just recognizing diversity of what is on the government side or the duty bearer side, and it's not always governments. For example, where it's constructions, you know, they might be commissioned and funded by the government, but then the contractors are private actors, for example, and then government is such a vast thing. There's local and sort of areas so much. Yes, there have been some instances of pushback, but more commonly it's been like blockages, I suppose, rather than they're not active pushback, but just lack of cooperation in terms of the most common one being not providing documents and information that should be public information, by law is public information. But in fact, it's just impossible to get hold of. That's been in both cases. And yeah, certainly it's weakened what the research was able to do in Ghana. It also limits the effectiveness to an extent of the monitors, because the model in integrity action programs is that monitors are monitoring against something that has been promised to be delivered. So it's not like they're not advocates as such. So they're trying to get something new from government. They're trying to get government and other actors to provide something that is budgeted for, is paid for, has been committed to do, but then getting that written commitment. If you've got it, then you can compare what's delivered to what was promised. But if you haven't got that written thing, then it does become harder. And so that's been probably the biggest challenge.
Usually the easiest one to withhold information and as a way of blocking sort of government accountability, public accountability to citizens. Yes, sir. At the back, you had some comment or question?
Yes. So I'm Prosper from Ghana. My question is actually related to the issue of pushback. It didn't come out very clear to me whether or not citizens had free access to the project sites, because I know that sometimes when there are even media reports about certain incidents at the project site, they are completely cutting off, and contractors don't give any information. They prevent people access to project sites. And then, so I want to find out if there have been any such experiences and how they were navigated. And my second point has to do with the PMCs. It's not too clear to me whether they are made up of duty bearers, only perhaps the local authorities, the technocrats, in the case of Ghana district assemblies. And I'm asking that because I'm looking at the question of sustainability as well. That if integrity action is no longer in the picture, how do we sustain this great initiative, encouraging citizens to also take up some of these roles? So I'm anticipating a situation where there could be some form of co-creation, even at the local government level, so that space could be given to citizens or civil society actors to be part of the monitoring team. That it will be integrated, and then they could work together, because the assembly or the local government authority has to share information about the project, and then we could also leverage that to do the monitoring.
Thank you, Prosper. That's two good questions. I'm going to take them to Mumuni and Elisheba. You are, on the ground. Prosper's first question was about pushback. Did they get the information, and how did they, or how did they deal with that? And to you, Elisheba, is about the project management committee. What is their makeup, and is it possible that they could be strengthened from the very beginning, including citizens in their makeup? Start with you, Mumuni, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, so I think that from our side, I would say that there was a little bit of a pushback in terms of the timeliness of release of information. Basically, citizens will require critical information as far as those projects that are going to monitor are concerned. And so the timely release of contract documents is what is actually important to actually begin the exercise. So there are still some projects that we haven't gotten, or citizens haven't been able to get the full complement of the data or information they require to, get their monitoring. I mean, I take the case of Get Fund projects. Ghana Education Trust Fund, it's an agency set up by the Ministry of Education, and they are directly responsible for financing infrastructural projects in the education sector. Now, if you need information on projects that are, funded by Get Fund, you are required to get that. Unfortunately, in fact, that is also the irony of our system. Get Fund awards contracts from national level without recourse to district assemblies that has the mandate to supervise and implement all government interventions. Even those contract information, it's not with the district assembly. They don't have that. So assemblies don't have that, let alone denying citizens. It's the case that Get Fund has it, and Get Fund is not at the district level. Get Fund until recently has always been in Accra. They have set up a zonal office in Tamale, and most of the districts are actually far away. So that has been a challenge. The fact that we have set up an agency which is making nonsense of our decentralization system, excuse my language, because this is a government institution set up to actually facilitate the process. Yet the mother agency that is mandated to do that itself, it's not involved in the process. And I think that that's one critical issue we have raised at a national dialogue, that the Ministry of Local Government is supposed to work with the, Get Fund to make sure that local government authorities actually have this. It is something that frowns on our very, good decentralized system that a lot of people have thinking about. But we think that, that has largely contributed to delays in releasing information, especially for Get Fund projects. I think that the other bit about the factors is the fact that if citizens monitor, raise concerns through their engagement, and there is no follow-up, I can tell you no change is going to happen. So there's what we call responsiveness tracking. Beyond engaging with authorities on the findings, there's actually responsiveness tracking, which citizens have to follow up now to find out whether the concerns they have raised are actually being addressed or not. And usually at the engagement session, citizens push, and that's the approach that we have been able to empower citizens with. They push for timelines. If you are going to get a contractor back on site, when is that going to happen? You know, specific dates is actually tracking to check whether that has happened or not. So yes, a lot of pushback, but I think also responsiveness tracking by way of follow-up, whether for information or ensuring that you know, actions are implemented, is very necessary for the achievement of results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mumuni. You point out one of the tensions of decentralization. Often governments will decentralize the responsibility and centralize the resources. That's always a tension that needs to be addressed and dealt with. I'm sure Nigerian friends will have something to comment on that. But Elisheba, I want to give you a moment to respond to the issue of the makeup of the project management committees and how they could be enhanced by including, at the very beginning, co-creation citizen monitors. Your thoughts, please, Elisheba. Hello? You've unmuted, but we can't hear you, Elisheba, for some strange reason. Go ahead, can you hear us?
Use the microphone. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yes, yeah, I was saying that the major challenge with is how the PMC is being identified. If you look at how the government now goes to the community to identify the project management committees, it's normally done politically. So people are not informed that the government is coming to initiate a project somewhere. And the few people who are informed are those who are aligned to the government, if I may say. And this means that anyone who is going to be appointed as the project management committee is like a watchdog for the government. But what we did was to ensure that first we sensitize communities who are the people who are going to elect this project management committee, so that they are aware what it means to be a project management committee, what is expected of them, so that when they go to elect one, or if they are appointed as one, they are aware of what is expected of them, and they are sure that they are able to deliver. So the citizen monitors were able to monitor because we were able to influence their attitude towards implementation of public projects, to understand their rights. So they were looking at it as a rights perspective and not a favor from the government. So the only way that this thing can change is to have a policy that will provide a guideline on how these PMCs are identified, what are their roles, and where do they report in case there are any issues. And if those issues are not addressed, then what will be the next step? Or maybe how does what powers that the PMC have in terms of implementation of these projects? So there's a lot of sensitization is necessary, and it is out of this thinking that in this last phase of the project that we also concentrated on enhancing community awareness in terms of planning, so that they are not only involved in monitoring these projects, but are they able to identify these projects? Are they able to influence and push for the implementation of that project, so that when they are monitoring, they are sure that this is something that we asked for, and we have to make sure that it is implemented in the right way, such that if it is not implemented in the right way, we are the ones to lose as the citizens. And all these lessons that we've picked through this project are some of the points that you are going to engage the government, and so for them to understand how important it is for citizens to be informed, and for citizens to also know their rights. And I think this is one of the areas in which we've been able to be recognized even by the government, because they are able to see the difference that has come with community monitoring. And also the monitors who have undergone this training, they have been trusted by the communities. So the areas where we implemented this project, we've had community monitors being identified by the community as project management committees. So they're already being featured there because the community has built trust on them. They know that these are people who we can always run to. They are people who have saved our projects. They are people who have made our projects look better. And maybe in that kind of environment, it's easier to make sure that the PMCs that are put in place by the government are able to exercise their mandate well and save, because we don't believe in maybe doing renovation, but if that money that would have gone to do renovation can be saved to do another project if the project was being implemented in a better way. And similarly for services, we've had those who are monitoring services, they had to undergo some various difficulties in the process, which includes not getting medical services for about 3 weeks. But at the end of the day, after those 3 weeks, they were able to get better services, and they were happy about the decision that they have made. So it also sent a lesson to them that if you want to get better services, the people that we elect to represent us in different communities need to be people who will use maybe the rights-based approach and not look at it as a favor from the government. Thank you so much.
Very clear. Question, I think you answered it by somebody, Steve. Next, management committees. So I hope Steve, or SB, I think it's Steve, you got an answer from Elisheba. Let's hear from you, Jasmina, here. Jasmina, in the room.
Thank you. Linnea, I have a question for you, because I know that GPSA recently has opened discussion around green accountability, and the whole accountability in climate crisis response is a big matter of concern for the World Bank. So where do you see added value for citizen-centered monitoring and for that very close collaboration between governmental stakeholders and citizens? One of the things that we've been discussing within Integrity Action is thinking, how do our partners and ourselves come together to enable these pathways? Because we've been seeing for decades and decades companies and Northern Hemisphere countries making very bold claims around benefits pouring into countries that are no longer chopping trees or burning charcoal, and therefore we're seeing better climate benefits. We were specifically looking into voluntary carbon markets, and apparently a percentage of each ton of carbon that has been traded, there are percentage of money flowing directly into those communities. We're seeing social bonds that are being traded on that claim that part of their profits are reaching those communities in Asia and Africa, and as a result, people are having better health and the health services, children have better education. How would you reflect on that? And again, going back to the question, where do you see added value of approaches like this being taken into the climate crisis response space?
Thank you, Jasmina. Thank you. First of all, yes, the GPSA is starting a new theme or embarking on a quite a journey, and that is the green accountability. So that's climate finance accountability, transparency, accountability in climate finance. And of course, that is citizens here are key for this, and monitoring is key as well from generating citizen data, not only to ensure that the policy making around climate finance or the where the finance is going is inclusive, but also that there are these many eyes to look at whether finance is going to where it should be, or if there are leakages or if there's corruption, then those many eyes can even, as we've seen from the research here, can deter that kind of behavior, and it can also help ring the bell or raise the flag where things are not as they should be. When thinking about the collaborative scene in that, Jasmina, your question was large. Did you want to hear about the way the citizens and CSOs can collaborate with government in this theme?
How do you see the opportunities if we see stronger collaboration and more of it between governmental authorities and citizens? Where do you see the benefits of that close collaboration going, and how can it influence this broader global discussion around green accountability or benefits flowing into communities that deserve to get that money?
Yeah. So here, collaboration, I think what we've seen from GPSA portfolio. So GPSA has given grants to CSOs for a decade now on collaborative social accountability. And in collaborative social accountability, citizens are one part of stakeholders, and they're represented through CSOs as one part of stakeholders around the same table, trying to jointly solve problems where they see it in governance and service delivery. So what we've seen here is when citizens, CSOs, and government are doing it, even from the start, doing it together. So for example, we have from Ghana, actually, we have evidence that when Ghana, who was a grantee of GPSA, got together with government counterparts on a problem in a steering committee, that was quite beneficial, because they were kind of on this at the table at this to jointly figure out what data needed to be generated to have good evidence on the services that were or were not provided as they should be. So so even having a co-jointly produced TOR for that data generation was then beneficial, because the data that was generated was seen as legitimate. It didn't have the tainting of potential bias from anywhere. It had already a readership that the government counterparts, the government institutions, they were waiting for that research to come, and there was an uptake kind of built into the system, and that was seen as beneficial for that kind of collaborative system when it comes to monitoring of services.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Yes, there's one from you too. We're supposed to stop like now, but I'm going to add 10 minutes or so. Is that okay? Okay, great. It's too early for you to go and have dinner anyway.
Yeah.
So let's have one from you, and back to you, Prosper, and then your third one from yes.
Right. Sorry, I'll try to quickly summarize my comment. I am Arman from Armavir Development Center.
In Armenia.
In Armenia, yes.
I even know.
We were on the panel. So just a quick note about one comment that you made about citizen monitoring being during the implementation of the project. Something that our experience led to us was that citizen monitoring and citizen participation is not only needed during the construction monitoring or implementation of projects, it's also important even from the planning stage, from the earlier stage, because we have seen many cases where school buildings were not designed based on the community needs, and they were not reflecting these needs. So I would say even from the planning stage, we need citizen monitoring. And one note about what if integrity action is not in the communities, right? Well, unfortunately, last few years, our paths have like not crossed, because like our projects were finished and we didn't have more opportunities to work together. And that's the donor and project reality, right? But a key point here is that integrity action always works with community-based organizations, local organizations. And there is a huge transfer of knowledge to us. And we keep on going and working. And we also, in our turn, try to multiply this effect with grassroots organizations. But of course, citizen monitoring or civil participation without these intermediary supporter, without civil society, without mechanism, even the policies. There are policies in Armenia that every local government body have to organize citizen participation, but they are usually not meaningful participation because the tools are not used properly, and it's just done to say, okay, we did a town hall meeting. So of course, the civil society exists for a reason, and we are there to cooperate, share the knowledge, and work together to bring these changes. Yeah, so this is our comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Let's start with yourself and then I'll go to Prosper. Go ahead.
Okay. My own is a comment. I'm starting with what happens with projects that are not monitored. When projects are not monitored, particularly from the perspective of where we're coming from, Plateau State, Nigeria. We don't have what you call project monitoring committees. We have consultants instead, who ensure that contracts for projects are usually done to design, according to quality and time. It is only when something goes wrong with the project that the government sets up a committee to go and determine what happens to it. I happen to be a contractor in the past, and now I'm a government official. I've also served as a consultant. And I know that for projects, for here, I'll choose to think of the citizens in terms of the owners of the project. That is the communities who own the project. Because I think the definition of your own citizens included the civil society. But in this case, I want to use the owners of the project as the citizens. And I want, the contractor is usually afraid of the citizens. Afraid. So if the owners of the project are the ones that supervise the project, there's likelihoods that nothing will go wrong with the project. I've done a project where I was the contractor. There was no government official that visited the project site once from beginning to completion. But because the citizens were there and were always making comments, I ensured that I did it to specification, particularly also because the project was from my village. And I knew that if anything— These were your relatives. Yes, if anything went wrong, I'll have problems. Then I know of another contractor who was awarded a very big project in his own village, but he refused to do the job because he knew that if anything went wrong, he's going to be in for it with his people. But where consultants are the monitors, which is the situation in Nigeria. What my sister was talking about, my brother, the person that made the presentation about Ghana. What is happening in Ghana is exactly what is obtained in Nigeria. That is why we have abandoned projects. So if we cannot, this issue of trying to replace the suggestion that we replace the PMC with the citizens, I think the best way is to cooperate with them to work together. Yes, because if they work together, if there's anything wrong, the citizen can only talk, and then the contractor will be afraid to come back to site. But then the consultants in our own case, if they are there and they work together with the citizens, they are the ones that will take a document back to government to work on. So it will be more effective. So that is my comment.
What were you building, just out of curiosity, in your village?
Bridge.
A bridge?
Yes.
Oh, those are very visible.
Yes.
Either people, you make life better for people with a bridge because you shorten whatever journey they make, or it is a very obvious failure.
Based on this also, I think that OGP is a big part of the solution.
Yeah.
Only that it's what I would say a toothless bulldog. Because they can only observe, and when nothing is done about it, they too, there's nothing they can do.
For OGP?
I mean the implementers of the age, those who are advocating for
open government.
Yes.
This is why we have this conversation, because these are the mechanisms by which the toothless bulldog grows some teeth.
Exactly.
They're called citizen monitors.
That there could be a platform where the government would be forced to be transparent, which is just all about asking somebody to be transparent. For instance, when you are awarding a contract, what is wrong with letting the people know the price of the contract?
Yes.
The quality of the product. Like my brother was talking, if the citizens are the ones that initiate the project, we want the hospital to be built on this side. The government will say, okay, we can build hospital, this is our budget for hospital, $1 million, for instance. And then they participate in supervision. But what obtains, particularly in where we come from, is government will just come and say, we'll build a hospital for you for $1 billion, and that is it.
And go in, don't make noise.
You see a contractor will come, whatever he puts for you there, you accept it.
With lots of gratitude. No, I know it happens. It happens in a lot of my country as well. See, we built this for you. Yeah, but maybe I didn't want it like that. You know. Exactly. But good point. We'll try and make the toothless bulldog more toothy, right? Prosper, and then yourself. I see people are getting interested.
I just mentioned that online they were struggling to hear.
So
if we just speak up,
raise your voices. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah,
there are a quick question. Whether moving forward, our panelists think that legislation would be a useful tool to strengthen citizen monitoring in terms of disclosure of the contract information, composition of the monitoring team, things like that. I'm just wondering if legislation would be a way to go moving forward.
Great. We'll come to yourselves. And yourself?
Yes, quite an interesting discussion. I hope they can hear me. Manji from Jos, Plateau State, Nigeria as well. And for us, you can see quite a team. We have a few more people elsewhere in another session. And this is just because this is a new administration that is in May, at the end of May, so basically May 29th, and has an unwavering commitment towards, enhancing the principles and values of OGP, which was one of the anchor commitments of the governor during his campaigns, and he mentioned he was going to advance that, and he's doing that at the moment. So what is obtainable as well, in addition to what has been mentioned by the two officials here as well that spoke before me, there is sort of a results delivery office, for the state that was sort of conceived by the last administration, last government. And that is sort of a policy mechanism to help in steering the policy direction of certain action that is required in terms of projects and programs of government. Those that are within, of course, the internal planning programs of the government itself, as well as those that are also part of engagement with the development community, as well. But that unit, of course, is not composed of in this form in Ghana and Kenya, where you have citizens being appointed into the office, and that's something I think that is quite unique, because this is sort of a formalized arrangement, in addition to what the project was mentioned earlier. This is an informal arrangement where the community, the beneficiaries, sort of constitute themselves in a monitoring committee. But having a formalized structure that they are recognized sort of also gives them, that tooth they are talking about. The contractors know that, okay, beyond this, what we have as a monitoring unit of various ministries or parastatals of government, we now also have the community stakeholders being involved in ensuring that these projects are meaningfully, implemented in a way that could be beneficial. Of course, this is something we would look at, and I think it's a very good lesson from also, the indices of processes for programs. The point you had mentioned is process by the central government sometimes tends to look at the responsibilities and roles, and oftentimes still retains the resource aspect. And even in terms of development programming, this is what we often see. You realize that this contracting that we're talking about gets to happen at that federal level, and at the local level, beyond what obtains at the national level, the contractors do not feel obliged to respond to now the local governments, the subnational governments, not even the citizens, so it becomes a bit convoluted. So I think these are things we also need to look at when trying to assess, the measure of impact and how responsive government is, to our programs, because at the local level, you could see a government being quite responsive, but that information gap or unavailability, even a non-existent, portal of information, local government will also hamper the sort of information that citizens require. But for us, again, there is an application like in Kaduna that people have always been referencing. So we had a model also from the last, that was designed. I don't think has been quite effective, but we'll work on seeing how that could serve us as monitoring mechanism.
Thank you, Manji. It's very encouraging to hear, from a local government, what they're planning to do and recognizing the challenge that is before citizens in terms of providing feedback and having it taken seriously in order to make the kind of changes. But Prosper, I know you have a question about legislation. Will that make a difference if it is legislated? Citizen engagement is and monitoring is legislated, whether at the local government level or at a higher government level. Maybe to ask you, Eli Sheba, you may have heard the question, but talk about legislation, because you mentioned about having a policy at the Kwale County level. Do you think that will make a difference? And my question to you is, why don't you draft the policy yourself? I hope you can hear me, Eli Sheba. There you go. I see your
Yeah, I think it can make a difference, because it will provide guidelines and procedure. Because the current challenge is, yes, the PMCs are there, and they came to force through executive order, because people were complaining that there are a lot of projects that are being abandoned, but citizens are not engaged. So there's no a clear policy on how these PMCs are supposed to be identified, their role, and where to report, and to whom. Maybe in case something is not right, who is supposed to be held accountable. So as much as the county government has established a monitoring department, you also find that they are very few. They are not even more than 10. And if you look at the number of maybe infrastructure projects being implemented in the county, there are so many, over 100. So it becomes very difficult to have maybe these officers doing a very close follow-up on implementation of that. And there's also a challenge that also happens in terms of contracting. We've seen some of government officials, or maybe friends to the government officials, who are being awarded these tenders. So in such a scenario, it means that it becomes difficult for a government officer to put on pressure to a friend, maybe who has been awarded this tender. But if communities are involved about maybe the procedures and the guidelines are clear in terms of how they ought to monitor implementation, then it becomes a bit easy to do the follow-up. So for us, we can do that initiative. However, we have to do a lot of lobby from the from our county government officials. We've had a number of legislations that have not been adapted since 2018. And this is very demotivating, especially for policies that are being fronted by the civil society organization. There's always a mentality from the government side that the civil society organizations have a lot of money to be spent. And again, looking also at competition, if civil society are not able to speak in one voice, so that if we are approaching the government, we are approaching the government as one, and we are clear about what we want the government to implement. So if there's one organization coming to talk to the government, then tomorrow another organizations come in, to an extent that our legislatures are requesting us to take them to expensive hotel to discuss these bills, and years go by, nothing substantial has been done. It's quite tiresome and not also fulfilling. So for us, the civil society, we have first to come together and ensure that we do this. The other challenge is we also have organizations that are not local. Maybe they are national organizations and some even international organizations, and maybe they have a specific agenda towards that. Currently, the local organizations have come together and were able to do some things together and push government. And actually, we have been recognized by the government. So wherever there are processes that require our input, they always get to us and ask us to give the input. But now with organizations from outside, the national organizations, they always implement activities on their own based on maybe their plans and budgets. And this is something that has drained a lot of processes in terms of coming up with policies. But what I can say is true. The civil society, for instance, our case, we've had experiences. We've seen how benefiting monitoring is. We've engaged some of the local leaders who are implementing these lessons within their areas. And in terms of citizen engagement and participation in those areas is so good compared to other areas. So that's basically what I can share from that perspective. It takes a lot, not only just one organization, but different organizations, including the national organization. We need to have one voice in terms of what we want to get out from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha, but don't give up. You see, you already have a model that works. That's all important hurdle to cross, that you have something that actually works. I think the challenge, of course, is to build a winning coalition of both local and other NGOs with government reformers, use those officials in those areas where it has worked, where they're delivering services, use the citizens who are benefiting from better schools and better ECDEs, and build that. But you're right, it is quite a journey. It takes time to convince, to get a policy in place, and then even more work to get it implemented, but don't give up. I think you're doing a fantastic job. I just have two more things that I want to share with you before I sort of round this out. Listening to this and reading the reports, two sort of softer, maybe less tangible things seem to me to be benefits of citizen monitoring. Number one is actually citizens are exercising their civic muscles. It doesn't happen very often, right? We sort of vote and then we go away and hope that government will bring to us development like rain from a cloud. But exercising civic engagement is itself a good thing, your civic muscle. By doing this monitoring, I think is a very important intangible. And the second intangible is, when government actually responds to these in the way that, those 5 ingredients that the Ghana team mentioned, stopping theft, improving quality, etc. Citizens begin to trust government even more, where the government trust can be very, very low, with responsive reaction from government to these things, citizens say, actually, this can work. This you can actually working in my interest. So I think those two intangibles, very difficult to measure quantitatively right there, but can be sometimes the outcomes of citizen monitoring. And I think let's drive that agenda as much as possible in order to make things a lot better for us here. But apart from that, I'd like to very much thank all of you. Albert, you've stayed on for all of this time, and Mumuni and our friend Elisheba, thank you. And also thank you to Linnea and who else? Who am I missing? Dan is right here, and Courtney, for sharing with us your insights. And thank you so much for those of you who are here this afternoon in this room. And we wish you a very happy OGP Summit over the next few days.
And thank you for moderating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.